The sun has gone down at Hangman's Hill, and the ghost at Misery Corner isn't walking tonight. So, welcome to the Weird Tales Radio Show, your weekly fix of ghost stories, urban myths, witchcraft, magic, and folklore. And now, here's your host, writer, award-winning journalist, best-selling author, and sometime werewolf hunter, Charles Christian.
Hello and welcome. My name's Charles Christian and you're listening to another episode of the Weird Tales Radio Show. We've got a very full programme for you today, so let's get on with it. And we start off with an interview with, and I'm reading from his own description here, veteran nerd with an unbound enthusiasm for everything you love, Marshall Julius. He's a film critic, blogger, broadcaster, quizmaster, and, as he puts it, collector of colourful plastic things. And he's got a new book out called Vintage Geek, the quiz book, which is all about all those TV shows and movies that we all loved, secret pleasure listening to, watching in the 1950s, 60s and 70s, well, 80s as well. So we've got Hanna and Barbera, we've got the original Star Wars trilogy, George Romero's zombie movies, The Simpsons. Anyway, lots of fantastic stuff. Very intriguing book. Even if you don't take part in the quiz, just all the facts and pieces of information there about things that you vaguely remember or didn't quite know. Anyway, over to the interview. Marshall, you have a new book out called Vintage Geek, the quiz book. And for the benefit of people who haven't seen it yet, and there is no excuse for not seeing it, because it's available on Amazon and presumably in all good bookstores as well, but that usually takes a little longer. Can you explain...
All good ones and all bad ones.
And
yes.
bad ones, yes. In fact, the bad ones are probably
all of them.
more likely to carry it. Can you explain what the subject matter of the book is about?
Absolutely. Essentially, it is a quiz book. It's a deep dive into 20th century fandoms. So things like James Bond, but only the Roger Moore years, George Romero's zombie trilogy, the original zombie trilogy, Silver Age of Marvel Comics, Star Wars, but only the original trilogy, John Carpenter's Apocalypse trilogy, Doctor Who, but only Tom Baker. Also, there's chapters on the Atari 2600 and Ray Harryhausen creature features and Universal Monsters and Hanna-Barbera. You know, it's quite wide-ranging. Because I thought everybody's an expert in something or a few things, not everything. So it's like you can go for the chapters and really test your knowledge of the things that you feel you know very well, and maybe learn a few things as well. Or you can just read it as a kind of like 50 things you never knew about sort of trivia guide. Beyond that, I also managed to rope in 50 fantastic celebrities, the kind of people who I regard as celebrities, not in today's kind of empty celebrity culture, but real celebrities, people who have, you know, written things and directed things and create the special effects for things. So people like, you know, Tom Savini gave me a question for Dawn of the Dead, having done all their wonderful, practical makeup effects. And Mark Miller, who wrote Kingsman, gave me a Roger Moore Bond question, which seemed super appropriate. I got questions by Mark Hamill, and George Takei gave me a Star Trek question, Sam Neill, Yardley Smith from The Simpsons. It's all come together, and every chapter is introduced with a kind of personal remembrance of each thing that I'm writing about. So because I wanted to capture, like, for people of our generation, what it felt like to experience these things for the first time. And also, if you're younger and you didn't live through them when they first came out, to kind of give a sense of the excitement of what it was like to live in a pre-Star Wars world that was suddenly rocked by Star Wars and things like that. And then to put the cultural importance of shows like The Twilight Zone and, kind of what they meant to everything. So it's it's kind of the world's first semi-autobiographical quiz book, celebrity contribution kind of trivia guide to, it's basically just everything I love and everything hopefully everybody else loves, put into one book that's disguised as a quiz book. And that is my short version.
That's your short version. Good. Why, on the selections, why the Roger Moore years? Because there's certainly, I know I'm older than you. I sort of grew up with the Sean Connery movies, and we always regarded Roger Moore as being a bit wet.
So certainly when I was a kid, that was a lot of people thought, oh, well, I prefer Sean Connery. He's edgier. He's, it's more macho. He's got all of that. But I think we've had enough years to reflect, having experienced many, many other Bonds since, that actually Sean and Roger played two sides of the Bond coin, and that everyone since has played variations of the two. Some have been a bit more Connery than Moore, some have been a bit more Moore than Connery. But I think that those two, honestly, I think now, looking back at the iconic performances of Bond, and although, yes, I love Sean Connery, I'd like to do a follow-up book, and then I promise I will do a Sean Connery years follow-up. But, given the choice between the two as a starter, I just thought that Roger Moore would just be more fun. They were the ones that the first Bond film I ever went to see at the cinema was The Spy Who Loved Me. So I just always had tremendous affection for Roger Moore and most of his films. I just think they're a good laugh, and I wanted my book to be fun and a laugh, and so it just seemed like that was what I wanted to lead with.
Well, the James Bond where Roger Moore emerges from the ocean in a wetsuit and peels it off to reveal a tuxedo underneath it is an iconic moment.
Well, yeah, Sean did, some kind of amusing stuff as well, but I just don't think it sat as easily with him. He preferred the kind of tougher, kind of steely-gazed, kind of Cold War kind of era sort of spy. That he played, and he did it very well. I don't think he could have did what Roger did. I don't think Roger played it that way because he wasn't capable. It was just that was just his style. That was just what they wanted. And he, why would he want to do the same as Sean Connery? We've seen lots of people since trying to do Connery, and it's like you can't do it.
Yeah. And Doctor Who. Now I'm with you on Doctor Who and the Tom Baker years. But why do you think he was the standout? I
think that he was the standout because of all the Doctor Who's, he had a kind of a twinkle in his eye that always made me feel like he was genuinely from another time and place, that he was from another planet, that he had he was incredibly kind of sort of, not exactly relatable, but he seemed completely real in the role. Mm-hmm. And I never got the sense that he was sort of acting or playing a role. I always felt that very much with the others. I've enjoyed a lot of the other performances, but I don't know. It felt like to me that Tom Baker was Doctor Who. And certainly he was my Doctor. And when I was small, I started watching Doctor Who. It was the last ever Pertwee episode. So it's basically, I watched the entire run of Tom Baker. And for the first few years, I absolutely believed that he was Doctor Who. I had no concept of him being an actor.
Yeah.
So, and there's nobody else that I could actually, there was no one else who I felt so completely convinced by. He came, and I actually write about it in my book. My dad used to have a chain of clothes stores in the 70s called Austin's Menswear, and he came to open one of them dressed as the Doctor. They even had the TARDIS outside, and I absolutely believed that he was Doctor Who. I knew also that my dad had somehow engineered him coming for it, so it was like I knew that I had every right to stand beside him and bother him all morning that he was there.
Yes.
But I mean, between so it's very personal for me. But between being obsessed by it and being absolutely convinced that it was real, and having met him and him being absolutely, completely kind of magical to me, that nothing could possibly compete with that in my eyes. You know, Tom Baker is Doctor Who. He always will be Doctor Who. I've interviewed him a few times, and though I know he's actually Tom Baker, still really in my heart, I also know he's actually really Doctor Who. So, you know, nobody comes close as far as I'm concerned.
That must be nice. No, having a father who had contacts with a Time Lord.
Yes. I felt very proud of him and very special. I spent the whole day asking him questions. I mean, I literally, like a limpet, I was stuck next to him. And there's a book in me. There's a picture of me in the book, rather, as looking up at Tom Baker with such love and devotion. It's like, oh my God, you know, I can't believe it. But I'm just like so happy and excited. And after asking him questions for like 2 hours, like where are Sarah and Harry, and you know, what's your favorite things to eat? You don't just eat jelly babies, do you? And you know, what happens if the TARDIS ever runs out of petrol? Or you know, I mean, I just literally just like everything that my 6-year-old mind could come up with. It was like my first celebrity interview, I suppose. I was like 2 hours. He looks over at me kind of amusingly, but slightly exasperatedly. He kind of shouts out to everybody else. There's like at least a couple of hundred people crowded into the show. He goes, "Who is this kid?" And like everybody laughs. And I thought, it's, you know, you're here because of my dad, so I'm just going to keep on asking questions. And I think I did, you know, until they had to like pull me away from him probably by the end of the day. But it was, amazing. Love Tom Baker. Love him.
Yeah. Now, one of the ones that surprised me was the Hannah and Barbara. Hanna-Barbera, right. Thank you. Because I grew up watching, I grew up watching Huckleberry Hound and Yogi Bear and you know, the Smarter Than the Average Bear, Boo Boo.
Absolutely, was the Flintstones and the Jetsons.
Yes, and again, it's one of those things. Reading through it, you don't realise just how much other stuff they did. It's fascinating that you know
they were tremendously prolific.
Yeah, and you know, and they go on to. I mean, there's some obscure things like why did BBC rename Top Cat, which was always puzzling to us because they didn't change the theme music. So
no, they didn't. They didn't. It was Top Cat, Top Cat, Top Cat, Top Cat, and then at the end they put a title card that said Boss Cat.
Yes,
and it was like, well, that's really strange because no one calls him BC or Boss Cat, or I mean, it's completely bizarre. But it was only because of the whole Top Cat cat food thing that they insisted on it. I don't know a single person that called it Boss Cat ever.
No, it's strange when they get changes like that. There used to be a Western as well in the 50s, it would have been, and that had the same name change, where I think the TV name was Tenderfoot, but it was quite clearly Sugarfoot, and the song was, you know, all about a young cowboy and things. But I say it is fascinating for anybody who's interested in pop culture, just on the background to it all. And
well, it's fascinating. I grown up obsessed with all this stuff and being very interested in not just the things itself, but the stories behind it. And it was something that I wanted to share. Obviously, I did a lot of research, though. It wasn't like I just sat down and it's like, oh, I remember that fact. I remember this fact. I did a lot of research and I found lots of really interesting kind of facts and stories. And I think that when you get to the end of a chapter, it goes backwards and forwards, in time. It's not linear the way that the chapters go. They go backwards and forwards. But by the end of each chapter, I think, I hope anyway, that I've sort of painted a picture of the subject that I'm covering in each chapter, that you get a sense of what it was like at the time, about a better understanding of it. And there are some wonderful stories that you could easily have been kind of lost to time that I've got back. And everybody's had a Hanna-Barbera phase, whether they realize it or not. And certainly, people of a certain age that grew up when, before you had access to 24/7, cartoons and content online and such, even before kind of, DVD and video, before any of that, when Saturday morning cartoons were like so incredibly important, like you get up early because that would be when there would be 2-3 hours of back-to-back cartoons on TV. And you would not want to miss that. And Hanna-Barbera programmed most of it. You had to. So they were a terribly important part of, I think, most of our childhoods. So it seemed like the obvious choice for me. Although next book I'm going to be doing Looney Tunes. Obviously, it was either Hanna-Barbera or Looney Tunes. Although personally, I suppose I'm an even bigger fan of kind of Bugs Bunny cartoons and the works of Chuck Jones and Friz Freleng and the like. I just had to make choices. One or the other. I didn't want there to be too much sort of.
No. It is a good balance. The book from mainstream movies, TV cartoons, games machines, and the likes. And I say, you do go way back. I particularly like the retro futuristic 50s sci-fi movies. I mean,
oh, good. I'm pleased.
That they still crop up from time to time, or you remember them from vaguely seeing them or seeing them as a B feature or somewhere. Sure. That was a classic. Now, one of the things is you call it Vintage Geek, and you say it's intriguing questions and answers, and should point out that the answers are included in the book. So it's not a case of just prompting you and leaving you hanging.
That would be kind of the most frustrating quiz book in history if it was only the questions. There's definitely the answer. The answers are quite extensive as well. Yeah.
Yeah, that is so. I mean, definitely the answers are well worth not just skipping through to see what the quick answer is, but to read the whole thing. But you say it's fascinating answers for nerds of all ages. Now, this brings up this question of nerds versus geeks, which some people get quite excited about, and they quite happily be described as a geek, but being a nerd sort of tends to imply you've got tape holding your spectacles together and lots of pens in your pocket with a pen, a pen protector. Where do you stand?
There is that.
Where do you stand on that line?
Well, honestly, I think that there are so many different definitions for both that I actually don't see that. I don't see them as being massively different. I always identified as a nerd rather than a geek, but Vintage Geek is a nice play on vintage chic. So it was like it was a good title. And I always thought that actually geeks were more like science people who were like really smart about space and science and maths and kind of they had a kind of real-time knowledge as well as real-world knowledge of science and the things that drives everything, as opposed to nerds who are obsessed principally just with pop culture. I mean, that would be my definition. So I guess geeks in my eyes are like nerd scientists. But I don't think there's really a huge difference. It's like the argument, like, are you a Trekkie or are you a Trekker? It's like, just pick one. It's fine. Whichever one you want to be. It's so long as you like Star Trek, you're okay with me.
That's brilliant. What activities are you doing to promote the book, along with, talking to people like me? Are you doing signings, or, can people expect you in a Waterstones at some stage? Or
I am expecting to do some kind of signing stroke kind of quiz events at different places. And I will be, kind of announcing them as and when they occur on my Twitter feed. I don't have anything lined up right now at this stage, at this early stage for the book. I've been, advised by many people that really the best thing you can do is plug away on social. That you can get it in print, you can get it. you could go on TV, you could do all of these things, but actually, the best place to reach your core audience is on social media these days. And fortunately, that's where I live. That's where I spend half my life. It's like I love Twitter, and I kind of built a community. Because I don't think of it as a follower. Like, I don't think of it as just everybody following me. I kind of think of it as a community. I've built this fantastic nerd community where it's just a safe place for kind of geeky activities. There's no politics. There's no trolling. There's no Brexit, no Trump. I definitely feel very much at home on Twitter. So that is principally what I'm doing right now. And, we'll see. I mean, I've been very lucky that as I got a lot of these kind of celebrity contributors to my book, many of them have already tweeted about it to their following. Yeah. And, you can't really beat like Mark Hamill tweeting how much he loves your book. That is better than that. I can't think there's really no better publicity than that sort of thing happening. And hopefully that will, that continue. I'm waiting for a lot of my American contributors to receive their copies. And when that happens, I'm hoping there'll be a kind of a wonderful tsunami wave of promotion. And so we'll see. We'll see. Fingers crossed.
And for people who don't know, you can be found on Twitter at Marshall Julius.
Indeed. And I'm always there.
You're always there. Yeah. Now, one of the things, just looking at your bio, because you mentioned the various things you've done, is describe yourself, and I've seen the pictures cropping up on Twitter from time to time, as a collector of colourful plastic things. Now, I have to say, this is one of the things I don't get, I must admit.
Okay.
But I do know a lot of people do, and there's a whole industry out there now producing them, and particularly if you go to, Comic Cons and the likes of that, they're huge. Now, what is the attraction of them to you?
Well, when I was very small, it's alarming how many stories people ask me questions. It's alarming how many stories begin with me saying, well, let me just take you back 45 years. It's like, you just know you're going to have to kind of get comfortable for this story, but I'll try and be succinct. But my cousin, Ronald, he's 4 years older than me and was a collector before me. And I used to, whenever I went round to his house, I would make him show me his collection. We didn't get into the kind of why do you collect or anything. It just seemed like a very cool thing to have. And the things that he had were treasures. He didn't just have like the British Star Wars trading cards. He'd somehow magically managed to obtain the American ones. And not only did he have the American trading cards, but he had the wrappers and he had the boxes that they came in and things that, you weren't supposed to be able to have necessarily. I mean, why would you keep the boxes? But I found that stuff just impossibly attractive. I was just completely kind of dazzled by it and started my own collection. And when I was, I was always a collector, I suppose. I've got things in my collection back from like Magic Roundabout badges from my 6th birthday party. And so going back 45 years, I suppose, by the time Return of the Jedi came out, I was, kind of 13, and I realized that, this was me. I just had to obtain things. I was just driven to it. And so it was like, okay, I'm a collector. That's who I am. That's how I identified. And it's like people say to, mountaineers, why do you climb the mountain? And they say because it's there, because it's a compulsion that they have, and they have to, it's like asking people to, why they do anything, really. They can put it into words, but that's kind of a rationalization, and it doesn't necessarily exactly get to the heart of why they do it. I would have to be a psychotherapist maybe to understand if it is something that can be understood. But I've thought about it a lot over the years, and I think it's because if you love something so much, you just want parts of it sort of in your life. Mm-hmm. It's like if you love Star Wars, you want some sort of physical manifestation of your love for it. And so, what could be better than having, the posters on your wall, or a couple of Darth Vaders on your desk, or even better, 300 Darth Vaders all over your walls. Or, and if your walls are full up, what could be better than having, a ceiling mural that you're slowly building, and your wife comes in and she says, Marshall, did you put another, 10 Pez heads up on your ceiling? And I go, oh, no, we'll never do that. But then obviously she knows that. Like I remember years and years ago, my dad took me to the off license. He was buying, kind of drinks, soft drinks and booze and things for a party. And so I went along to help him. I was very small. And he got a crate of Cokes, like the proper old fashioned, bottled Cokes and that fantastic, iconic design. And even then, I was like 6 or 7, but there was just something about that bottle that I thought was just, it looked like art to me. And I asked him if I could have one. Not to drink, but just as an ornament. And actually, to his credit, he didn't look at me and say, Marshall, you're insane. That's, what do you want, a block of cheese on your wall next time? But he said, yes, of course. And so I took it. And actually, I still have it. I still have that Coke bottle. I'm kind of looking at it right now. And
what do you do? I mean, you just mentioned just now that you looked over and you could see the Coke bottle. So clearly you don't have them all stored in crates in your basement or anything. You've got them all out on display, or as much as you can?
As much as I possibly can, yeah. I mean, there are a few things that it is... You can't just keep amassing stuff over a whole lifetime and to have it all out. I'm an unboxer. A lot of people find that horrifying, but it's like I'm not collecting for monetary, kind of gain. It's not as an investment necessarily. A lot of the things I've got are valuable. Yes, they would be more valuable if I kept them in the boxes. But if I kept toys in the boxes, wouldn't I be more like a toy store than a fan or a collector? And I think if you're going to invest money in something, you can invest it in sounder stuff than comic books and toys. Because yes, when you try and do it deliberately, you end up buying stuff that a million other people have also done deliberately, and then those things aren't valuable. When the reason that boxed $6 Million Man toys are more valuable than, say, boxed Star Wars toys from the kind of special edition era of the 90s, is that when the $6 Million Man toys came out, they were for kids. They were, nobody thought to not to take them out of their boxes and play them. Whereas now people get them, and it's like, sometimes they'll buy two, one that they can take out and one that they can just keep in a box. And so you've got all these people with lofts full of stuff for the same stuff, and it's not rare. I know there are lots of toys, most of which have been unboxed, never played with, never displayed. And because they're not at all rare, they're actually, not worth very much. And so what is the point? It's just clutter. It's just clutter. So, displaying is very important to me, being surrounded by it. My dad was a window dresser. Before he got his own clothes shops, he was a window dresser. My mum, she was an artist, and she never made a living as an artist, but that's what she was. And I like kind of collages and murals, and I like displaying things. And for me, that's kind of how I express it. So it's kind of like my den, my room where I work, where I'm talking to you now, where I have my collection. It's like one enormous work of fan art, basically.
That's lovely.
One overwhelming work of fan art. When we moved into the house, my wife said to me, and she's not a collector, she's incredibly tolerant of me and my madness, though. She said, Marshall, you can have the biggest room in the house, but you have to keep all your shit in it. I will take that. And I will work with it. And, it has. Occasionally it reaches a tendril out, and there's a wall here or there, or a Spider-Man figure will kind of sneak into the bathroom or something. But for the most part, I've tried to respect that. Kind of caveat. And no, I appreciate it very much.
Oh, that's wonderful. Well, just to recap, your book, Vintage Geek, the quiz book by Marshall Julius, is out now. It's published by September Publishing. it's widely available in the UK, and it's also shipping in the US as well now, is it?
It is. You can get it there from Amazon UK, but also it will very, very, very shortly be available from Amazon US. They're showing a December release date, but I'm assured that that's just them covering things, and that actually it will be available in the States much sooner.
Brilliant. And it is 320 plus pages, and for UK the price is $12.99. US, the copy I've got showing $16.95. Well, that was fascinating talk, and I say I've been dipping into it, and dipping into things that I wouldn't have normally bothered about. I mean, for example, the John Carpenter Apocalypse trilogy completely passed me by. It must have been a time in my life when I was doing other stuff. And apart from The Thing, the rest of it was completely lost on me, whereas now I'm looking it up and trying to find more about it. So it is actually... Sorry, you go on.
So that makes me very happy. That makes me very happy for you to say that, because I think part of what I do is to try and kind of spread the word about all these wonderful things. And I've heard from quite a few people now that this book, it brought their attention to things that they weren't really that aware of, or it's kind of like kind of piqued their interest in watching more 50 science fiction films, or watching different kinds of horror films, or going back and watching these various shows, watching the Twilight Zone or stuff. And so that just makes me very happy that it can actually kind of drive people towards these things, because that was one of the key things that I really wanted for it, honestly.
I say there's an element of it triggers memories, and you see a name or you see a reference to something, and you can vaguely remember it, and you can vaguely remember a Twilight Zone episode or something, and I remember that vaguely. Then read up on it and read the answer, and then read a bit more, and then with the power of the internet, do a bit of research and find out more about it. So it is actually, it's I think the point is it's more than just a simple Christmas quiz book that has a lot of questions and answers, and once you've done it, you forget about it and move on. So no, it is fascinating. So anyway, Marshall,
thank you very much. Thank you.
I've taken up enough of your time. Thank you very much for your time. Good luck with the book.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
You're listening to the Weird Tales radio show with Charles Christian.
And now we have another interview. Yes, two. And this is with Gary Parsons, who's a filmmaker who's made short films, is also a film historian, and he's going to be talking about British witchcraft documentaries of the 1970s, which was a bit of a phenomenon, teetering on that fine line between informative and exploitational. I met Gary at the recent Fear in the Fens festival, and I say, if you can catch one of his talks, well worth it. But here's the man himself. Right, Gary. British witchcraft documentaries of the 1970s.
It rolls off the tongue, doesn't it? It really does.
It's a topic you've talked about several times, and you're doing it again, and you're promising this is the last ever time you're going to do it. What got you interested in talking about it in the first place?
It was one of those things that there was nothing written about it. Mm-hmm. And when you study film, trying to find subjects where no one has written anything about or no one's really discussing is very hard. And because I've seen the films, or some of the films, and I thought to myself, well, why is no one talking about this at the time? And I got an offer to do a talk at Cambridge along with Darren and Andy from the Folk Horror Society, Folk Horror Group, and stupidly I put in my thing and sort of said, I'll do it on witchcraft documentaries of the 1970s, and they accepted it. Okay, by this point, I'd not written a word. Okay, so I then had to go and do my research proper. Before this was just an idea. And it's one of those things, just because of, I was the only person going and asking, getting to talk to some of these people who were part of the films and delving into archives and whatever else. I built it up from there. It was again, sometimes these things are serendipity. You think that, you come up with an idea, and then later on you think, oh God, I've actually got to write about this now, and that was it. I mean, it's just because nobody had covered it, and I thought it was an area worth covering. And at the time, especially when I first did it, nobody was talking about these films. They'd kind of been largely ignored, and to be honest with you, I never even thought there'd be an audience to hear a talk about it. So I did it at Cambridge, and then I got asked by the Fortean Society to do it. And I said, yes, fine. They said to me, 50 people, is that good enough? 50 people, that's fine, Conway Hall in London, 50 people, that's fine. I ended up doing it in front of 450 people in the end. And they kept selling tickets, and I just, I thought, where's the interest come? And that was it. But I think it's just because nobody was discussing these films at the time. And it's always good to be the first, sometimes it is good to be the first to sort of just bring, I just want to bring awareness to them.
Yeah.
And that was the thing. It was just making sure that people became aware that these films existed, and that they're certainly a part of culture. Because they're documentaries, you're looking at a cultural aspect as well as a filmic aspect that had just been ignored.
Yeah. So, a quick summary then of what were the witchcraft documentaries. I mean, the 70s was a period where, if you like, witchcraft had come out into the open, and the first witchcrafty type movies were out, and certainly I remember seeing stuff in various magazines and newspapers about it. So what were these? Were they sort of objective documentaries, or were they more exploitational?
A bit of both. There's one called The Power of the Witch, which was made for television, and that is, that sort of, it splits in two halves. It sort of kind of gives the story of witchcraft, and then effectively about halfway through it then turns into a sort of, these people are evil kind of stuff. Legend of the Witches was kind of made as a documentary again. This is for cinema use. For, again, explaining witchcraft, which it does very well. But the fact that it was actually, when it was released, it was actually put on with a nudie feature. So most of the audience would have seen it at some kind of Raymond Review cinema sort of thing in Soho. Yes. And the other one, Secret Rites, was actually made, even though the people, the Alexanders and people like it weren't really quite aware of it at the time, was actually sold as a nudie flick. So, and that's the reason that the guy who made it, the reason he got the money for it is because he effectively sold it as, well, look, I can get young witches to be naked in it. He sold it to Alex as kind of, I can promote, witchcraft through it. Alex thinks this is great, witchcraft gets a promotion, and instead, obviously, he just fills the screen with various ladies' parts, for want of a better word. Yes. So yeah, they fall between the two. There's serious work, and then the nudie flick kind of thing. So, but they are basically their films are held in amber. Okay, they're locked in a time, and in a strange way, they're kind of bizarrely innocent, as well as being exploitative as well. You could call it.
Well, I mean, this was pre the level of nudity and sexual explicitity we now get in cinemas, never mind what's available on porn channels and things.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, again, Secret Rites was sold to mainly to the European audiences. So there's a cut of the film that's actually 90 minutes long that the BFI don't own a copy of. They only own a copy that's 47 minutes long. And so the rest, basically, they filled it out with lots of scenes of people going at it to sell it to a European audience. And that's the thing. I mean, sadly, and I think that's why these films got relegated for so long, purely because both the cinema ones, Legend of the Witches and Secret Rites, were effectively sold as titillation. And that's why they've been ignored. I mean, even with, I discussed a film, Witchcraft 70, which is a European film. Even that was, again, an exploitative film, sold for sensationalism. And, so really only Power of the Witch is the one that kind of seriously discusses it with any kind of form of reverence. But the Legend of the Witch does it as well. But again, it's been seen for many, many years as basically a nudie flick, unfortunately. And until recently, when it's now been reappraised.
Yeah.
So.
And how long was the phase of these films coming out?
About 3 years.
Yeah. So what, early 70s?
Yeah, 1970 to about 73 was a cut-off point. Again, by the time you sort of start hitting into the mid-70s period, interest in this kind of thing begins to wane by the time you get to sort of about 76. For some reason. Even with horror movies, they begin to sort of, or in Britain anyway at least, they begin to sort of kind of get rid of the subject of witchcraft. Because Britain changed within the mid-70s. Again, the whole kind of hippie free love movement was dead, punk rock was in, all that kind of thing, and suddenly things shifted on the axis very quickly. And these things seem to sort of then almost have an antique quality about them. I mean, Hammer Horror weren't making movies anymore, Amicus really weren't making horror films anymore, because they were then making things like At the Earth's Core or something like that, Edgar Rice Burroughs kind of stuff. So there was a point where they thought, this stuff is not selling anymore. At that point in the early 70s, it was selling, allegedly. So, again, we got no records really of how popular something like Legend of the Witches was, because it was put on with another film, which was a skin flick film.
Yeah.
So how many people went along to see Legend of the Witches, or how many people went along to see this other film, we have no idea. But
and they weren't on the normal movie circuit, so you wouldn't get the normal returns and data that if it was on at the Odeon would.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, most of them were shown at small, like flea pit cinemas at the time. So, mind you, Legend of the Witches did have a premiere. So it actually had a proper premiere, which a lot of those films didn't have. Maxine Sanders and Alex went along, and various other people who were involved with the Coven. There's actually like a card that was given to these people as an invite card for the first screening of it. So it wasn't like that underground, really. So, I mean, because a lot of films wouldn't have premiere screenings, especially small budget films at that time. I mean, a lot of Hammer films never had premiere screenings beyond, when they started churning them out in the 70s. So the fact that this did have a premiere screening says something. It said it had money behind it. But the other thing is, the theory is now it's actually made as a tax loss film as well.
Right.
So, and that was the other thing. Again, you put money into a film, then you can sort of say, well, I financed this, and so you pay less tax for it. So it was something to do with, again, exploitation companies sort of thinking, okay, we'll make this, and it will be used as a tax loss. I mean, Monty Python did exactly the same thing.
Yes.
So with Holy Grail, all the people who put money into that, Pink Floyd, Led Zeppelin, used it as a tax loss.
Yeah.
So, and later George Harrison did the same thing for Life of Brian. So this was, pretty standard at the time. People would invest in movies as some kind of tax loss move. So, and that's pretty much how Legend of the Witches got made.
Right.
So, but Secret Rites, I'm pretty sure, was financed from Europe. But again, there's no record, because people wouldn't be keeping records, because these things were seen as B-movie films a lot of the time, and exploitation films. So, it's bad enough trying to find out things about movies sometimes that weren't put out like that, let alone, things that were probably just backhanders in pubs or whatever else.
We were also talking 50 years ago, and company records, things get lost, and the buildings get pulled down, and the filing cabinets get trashed. And
well, again, a lot of these companies existed for maybe only a couple of years, or maybe even to make that one film.
Yes,
they would invent a company, make that one film. It'll be a tax loss, and everything goes, nicely gets burnt in an accidental fire, kind of thing. So. That's what happened in those days, So, yeah, it's been difficult enough to try and find any kind of paper trail with these movies. In fact, difficult enough trying to find anything about them, really. So, and every now and then, I'm still finding new bits. When you talk to people who are involved with the making of the movies, and the cast especially. You find out something new, a new little gem, and you kind of think, oh, okay, I didn't know that, or something about the making of it or what happened, and you get these anecdotal tales, which are really quite marvellous.
Do any of you mentioned one of them that there's a 90-minute cut in existence. Are they still available, the movies, or on DVD or what? Or?
The BFI have just released Secret Rights, but as a 47-minute cut, because that's the only cut they own. There is a 90-minute cut of it out there. At the time, there were magazines who visited the set of the film, and also magazines that reviewed the full version of the film, and they give the full running time for the film. So it's just the fact that these things haven't turned up. I mean, again, the 90-minute cut was probably sold to Europe. I don't know if it was screened here, but the cast members have told me that they saw a 90-minute cut when they saw a screening of it. So again, I'm going by what people were telling me at the time about the films and what they saw and what their experiences were. So whether that was sold to UK or not, I'm not aware of. But should be somewhere out there, a full 90-minute cut of the film, but probably more than likely that will turn up in Europe rather than in the UK. Certainly, the BFI don't own that.
Now, changing the subject, and your T-shirt's reminding me, you've also been doing stuff about Aleister Crowley recently, giving some talks on him.
Yeah, I've done...
Crowley, sorry. Crowley.
I've done two talks, one about the history of Crowley in cinema, starting off with Rex Ingram's The Magician film, which is the only film that Crowley ever saw, a depiction of himself he ever saw at the cinema. Crowley was an avid cinema goer. So even when he was living in Sicily at the Abbey of Thelema, he would go to the local town, Palermo, and go to the cinema about once every week or so. He was an avid cinema goer. So The Magician was the only film that he ever saw of himself. There's a lovely story about how he tried to sort of infiltrate Hollywood as well at the time. And that talk goes right the way through to present day. So it goes, so it traverses 100 years of cinema effectively. And the other one I've just done was Kenneth Anger and the making of Lucifer Rising, which actually isn't about the making of Lucifer Rising, because it's about the making of Lucifer Rising that never got made. So it's actually the making of Invocation of My Demon Brother. So that goes from 67 to 69, 70. So there's a cut-off point. It just deals with like those 3 years where everything happened for Anger. He was in the eye of the storm for so many different people, including Anton LaVey and the Church of Satan, the Charles Manson family, and the Rolling Stones and the Beatles, etc. So it brings in a whole group of people. Then he seems to be in this epicenter where all this stuff is happening. And to be fair with you, he's also one of the people who almost kicked some of these things into happening as well. And of course, you discuss about Donald Cammell, the guy who made Performance, who ends up being in the proper version of Lucifer Rising. So so it's a bit of a cultural history map of 67 to 1970, and the film that never got made. So, that's been quite good fun. I enjoyed doing that. So it's the first time I'd done that a few weeks back, a couple of weeks back, and it's enjoyable to do. It's enjoyable to talk about all these different characters and individuals.
Yeah.
Kind of.
What other movies have been made relating to Crowley?
Well, obviously, Anger's work. A Dark Song is a recent one. Oh God! Now you get me on the. I've been like Darren now. There's quite a few. There's obviously the Devil Rides Out.
Yeah.
Night the Demon, because Night the Demon was based on Somerset Maugham's story, and Maugham based the character of Carswell on Crowley. And obviously the Devil Rides Out, McCarter is, Dennis Wheatley said he based it on the character of Crowley. So yeah, you've got all those kind of touchstone pictures. Plus you've got, there's a film called The Abbey of Thelema, which is an American film made about 10 years ago. And there's a Spanish film called Perdurabo, or Where is Alistair Crowley? So, which is actually where someone, the guy who made it, actually recreates the inside of the Abbey of Thelema, how it was back in the 1920s. So, and so in between you have all that, and then you talk about art terrorist organisations doing video art, things like Temple of Psychic Youth, based on Crowley rituals, etc., etc.
Yeah. Does Crowley himself crop up in any movies? I mean, there's plenty of photographs of him from way back.
Oh, you mean actually at the time?
Yeah.
There's no footage of Crowley,
No.
from filmed at the time. There's none, which is a bit of a strange thing, because I would have thought he would have loved to have been filmed, and there's nothing that's ever turned up. So as far as we're aware at the moment, there's actually no surviving footage of Crowley. Obviously, lots of photographs, but nothing that survives of him. The closest we kind of get is the Kenneth Anger documentary, where he goes to the Abbey of Thelema in 1955 and uncovers all the murals.
Right.
And that was filmed by the British Picture Post magazine. Well, and it's a lost film, 25 minutes, and it's been gone since. No one's seen a copy of it since about 1960. So even Anger doesn't have a copy of it. So one of the great lost documentaries or great lost films. So somewhere probably it may turn up, but again, with all these things, all we got now is photographs, these tantalising photographs of what was potentially shown within the film. But yeah, there's no footage of Crowley at all. There's none that's certainly been uncovered yet. Maybe somewhere in an archive there might be.
Yeah, I mean, it's quite unusual in the sense that he was one for the publicity.
Yeah. And in fact, he was very much into film as well, and he enjoyed film. So yeah, it does seem strange that nobody ever filmed him, or he wasn't part of anything. But again, cameras weren't that readily available at the time.
No, not movie cameras.
Yeah,
no.
and he lived a fairly transient lifestyle when he was at his height. So he was never in any one place at any one time for any particular length of time. So. Yeah. So he was a hard man to pin down. He kept moving for quite a long time until he got too old to be able to do that. Too old and too poor to be able to do that anymore. So
yes, yeah. And we've already mentioned that you're hoping this is your last ever talk about witchcraft documentaries. What are your next projects going to be?
Actually, the next one I'm doing is I'm doing the 1970 to 1980 Kenneth Anger, so the actual real making of Lucifer Rising. So that's my next one. I'm just I'm in the process of writing that at the moment, researching. So 10 years to make a film that lasts 30 minutes is, even by most people's standards, is pretty slow going. But it's an incredible story. Again, it's a story of curses, Crowley, Led Zeppelin, and goodness knows whatever else. It's almost. It's one of those things that the truth is more ridiculous than any fantasy you could make up about it, and again it has a little bit of Charlie Manson in there as well. The story of it is absolutely ridiculous, making of it, and the curses, the whole Jimmy Page cursing thing, is almost comedic value.
A quick rundown on that.
Basically, Jimmy Page was meant to do the soundtrack for Lucifer Rising. He actually recorded about half an hour's worth, 25 minutes worth, Anger wasn't very happy because it took him, strangely enough, he was blaming Jimmy for taking a long time to do the soundtrack, even though it took him 10 years to make a film. And he said basically Jimmy was a heroin addict and things, and that's why, the fact that Jimmy was actually touring the world with Led Zeppelin, who was the biggest band in the world at that point, didn't kind of enter into Anger's sort of sphere of things. And so him and Jimmy had a falling out, and he decided he was going to curse Jimmy with bad luck and make him into a toad. But it's almost like the Python thing. Well, I got better, yes. Kind of thing. There's that sort of element to it, and it's people who are taking too many drugs and taking too much Crowley, and thinking that they can do this and do that. But yeah, there's lots of little stories like that. The more you research it, the more you come across, and the more you think, God, that's absolutely ridiculous and laughable. But yeah, it's wonderful, and that's what you got. It's when you do a talk like this, you have to realise that you've got to do that fine line between being academic and entertaining, because you want people to get the information through, but also when you're dealing with a story like this, the entertainment factor of the ridiculousness that goes on at these times is pretty far outweighs discussing the films on any kind of broader intellectual level, because the stories, people always go away and remember the stories rather than your breakdown of the scenes in the movie and what they represent. I think more people went away from the last one probably remembering all the salacious facts rather than...
That's brilliant. Right. Thank you ever so much for that. That was brilliant.
Cheers. Thank you.
And that's it. We're out of time. Just remains for me to say thank you very much for listening. We'll be back again same time next week. And until then, stay well, stay different. Good night.
Black Shuck, the demon dog of East Anglia, is baying at the moon, which means it's time for us to go. You've been listening to the Weird Tales radio show with Charles Christian, your weekly fix of ghost stories, urban myths, witchcraft, magic and folklore. You can keep in touch with us online at www.weirdtalesradio.com, by email to weirdtales@icloud.com, and on Twitter @ChristianUncut. Join us again next week for another edition of the Weird Tales radio show. Good night.
This podcast is a part of Straight Up Strange Productions. Discover more shows like this one at straightupstrange.com.